getting to the second to last story in this, which is Punisher issue 10 and Daredevil issue 257. And they're connected, but also not. So we'll start with Punisher issue 10, which is that there's a guy who is poisoning people's aspirin with cyanide, and he's just killing random people. So Punisher goes after him. Turns out it's a disgruntled employee that worked at the this bottling plant, and he had some issue with them. We don't know in this issue, but there's something going on, and he goes crazy, and he leaves the company, and he's just making the company look bad by killing people, which is not acceptable. Absolutely not acceptable. But as Punisher's about to kill him, Daredevil steps in, and they have a big fight that's pretty fun. And Daredevil ends up taking the guy away. Cut to Daredevil issue 257, where we find out Daredevil, he gets involved in this mainly because the press pressures him into it. That's the weak part of this. But Daredevil starts investigating. We find out that the guy couldn't cope because he's just not computer literate, which is kind of sad. That computers took over his job and he was pushed out. And that there's like some sort of mental illness is implied, and so Daredevil's trying to stop him, and then he comes across Punisher, and then they end up in a fight. We also get an interesting opening to Daredevil 257 that is not the same as Punisher issue 10, where we see Punisher gunning down a bunch of mafiosos, which I thought was fun. Also, because this is during the 80s, we have Typhoid Mary stuff. I won't say too much about who Typhoid Mary is. She's a recurring protagonist and antagonist. One of my favorites, if I'm being honest, of Daredevil's rogues gallery, I guess you would say. Typhoid Mary is a fascinating one. The woman who wrote the Daredevil at this time really doesn't get the credit I think she deserves. And her name is Anne Nakenti. And Anne Nakenti's run of Daredevil, I think, should be as legendary as Frank Miller's. It's certainly utterly fascinating, in my opinion. I've only gotten to read a handful of scattered issues of it, but they recently did an omnibus of her stuff, and they're doing a second volume of it, so I'll be checking that out in the not too distant future. Unfortunately, it's overshadowed by both the Miller run and the Bendis, the later Bendis run. But it is fascinating. The Typhoid Mary character is fascinating. Of course, we get a little bit of Kingpin action going on. Kingpin, both Matt Murdock and Kingpin are interested in the same woman, but they're not. It's not the same woman because of a weird split personality thing. But I won't get too into that. That's getting into the weeds. But I used to talk about this when I was going through the Back to the War omnibus with Spider-Man, and Spider-Man's 1,000 plot lines going on that we would, if you read that omnibus, it skips around through all sorts of amazing Spider-Man, like, side plots that keep going in the background, which is kind of, it's fun, but it's not engaging because, I don't know, it just seems dated and stuff that you'd have to read Amazing Spider-Man forever to understand. With Daredevil 257, you get what's going on with the whole Typhoid Mary thing, and you know it does the right amount of like information that you want to go, hey, I want to read more of this Daredevil stuff. And I really like that. I also like that we get two different perspectives. We get the Punisher perspective in Punisher issue 10, and we get the Daredevil perspective in Daredevil issue 257. And it's like two sides of a coin and just two different ideologies looking at things. And I really like it. There's some discrepancies between these two issues with the stuff, with the content that they share, but that you can chalk that up to more in the line of like perspective, and I like that's how you should write something like this, and I'm all about that. I remember in Nathan Edmondson's run, there's an attempt to do something similar to this, between Punisher and Black Widow, and it does not really work particularly well. It was okay. I remember that back in the day. But like with a lot of Nathan Edmondson stuff, it's just kind of, it's alright. If only we knew how much worse the Punisher comics were going to get after that. Because in hindsight, I know this is getting off topic, I was very critical of the Nathan Edmondson run of Punisher. Because it really didn't make much sense. It was not timed well, because at the time the Punisher character was part of the Thunderbolts. And that all takes place on the East Coast. Why is Punisher now suddenly on the West Coast? We found out why at the end of that Thunderbolts run. But it took a long time to get there. It didn't work. Suddenly we have a new costume for Punisher. Everything took forever. He pretty much goes after one antagonist for like 15 issues. It was ridiculous. And on top of it, and I haven't said this, there's a lot of censorship with Punisher stuff in the 616 universe. There always has, and there probably, unless otherwise specified, it probably always will. I know that the new two miniseries that are going on right now are called Red Band, and Red Band is basically the new Marvel Max, but still in the 616 universe. So they're parental advisory, and they actually, show like the graphic violence. I don't think they swear, because Marvel still has even though Stan Lee's dead, they still have a problem with swearing in comics. I don't really get it. And there's a lot of swearing in these comics, especially in Punisher issue 10. There's a lot of swearing that is edited out. And I like that. I like it. It's done in a way that you can tell what the words are supposed to be. Whereas nowadays, they edit stuff, and it's like I talked about in the, what was that, Predator versus Wolverine comic, how the swearing, like, it didn't make sense, like, at all. Like, they just put random asterisks and, like, ampersands in, and it just didn't make any sense what was trying to be conveyed. It's weird. Like, in Nathan Edmondson's run, I'll never forget, and I'll talk about this because I do plan to re-review all that at some point in a collected form, because it was written for the trade, which is something I don't like. I don't like that is the standard. It's been the standard for like almost 20 years now with comics, but it's a detriment to Cape Comics, in my opinion. A lot of Cape Comics do well with like a one-off or like a 2-issue arc, but trades sell, and so they write for the trade. They'll write a 4 to 6 issue arc when it doesn't necessarily need to be that. But we have this build up to this, and Punisher unalives the main antagonist, and it's caught through a cell phone, and it's blurred. And I just remember, I'm like, these are parental advisory stickered comics, and we're blurring things. Like, what's the point? Like, I get with something like what's in here in the Circle of Blood Epic Collection, they weren't parental advisory. They weren't doing that. They had to write around this, because this was still an era, even though these are pretty mature comics, they're still written that kids can read them. and they're edited in such a way that it's kind of all ages. So like, eh, it makes somewhat like it's for a wide audience. But like when you put a parental advisory sticker on, you know what? Parents should be viewing that, and they're looking through the material they buy their children, and judging like, oh, I should or should not buy this for my kid. You know, that's why you have a parental advisory sticker. It warns a parent so they look through it. I know my parents went through stuff like that. They didn't really care because by the time I got into that stuff, I was like a teenager, and they didn't care at all by then. And like the whole thing, like it shouldn't be like dependent on what author's writing it. Because if I know something's going to be have a parental advisory sticker and be written by Garth Ennis, for instance, I know what I'm getting into, right? Like, but if you just throw it willy nilly on things and you're editing out swearing and you're editing out, like the blood and stuff, like what are you doing? Why have it on there? So I guess this red band thing is now their reason to that they can put the blood back in. I don't. It's like I said, I have not read the new stuff yet. I will. We will actually get reviews on that when that's collected. Don't worry. There's a plan to get to that in soon. But I don't know about the swearing and stuff. But would I recommend these two issues that I talked about? Yes. Definitely yes. I give this a solid 4.7 out of 5. It's almost perfect. Perfect two solid single issues. I don't, because like they don't really gel 100%. Like I said, Daredevil 257, it's setting up other things with like the Typhoid Mary arc, and that if you're not going to read that, that's going to deduct points from this. And you should read the Daredevil issue along with the Punisher issue, because if you just go ahead and read Punisher issue 10, you're not going to get a lot out of it. It's paired with Daredevil 257 that you get the full thoughts and story behind it. And it's just a great example of when Daredevil and the Punisher cross paths, which is my favorite. I love that. I love when Frank Miller did that. I love when it's doing it in this. I even liked it. Oh gosh, Dan Slott did it back in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. During like the Rucka era, where we had Daredevil, Punisher, and Spider-Man all had to team up together. It's always fascinating seeing Daredevil and Punisher, whether they're being forced to team up or they're different ideologies, that sort of thing. That's fun. Even when Garth Ennis takes the piss out of Daredevil or any other superhero, it's always fun to see. So, anyway, have a nice day.